Okay, it's 14:41, 1 minute already. We have 2 hours, which is a good thing, and four wonderful presenters. Welcome to the last panel of today, Illicit Cultural Objects Today, Global Networks and Regional Crimes. This panel brings together different but logically connected levels of the same problem. The global networks behind illicit cultural property crime, the national response through legislation and enforcement, and finally, the institutional realities faced by museums. And of course, in the end, ICOM will tell us, or the museums, how we can actually do things. So let's go. I will not take your time much more. I'm happy to give the floor to Dr. Samuel Hardy, cultural property criminologist, who will introduce us the very complex system of the black market, polycrime, corruption and conflict financing. Please.
Thanks. First of all, I would say I'm very conscious that I'm from the UK and talking about pretty much everywhere apart from the UK. But I would say that we do all face the same problems. The rule of law is under threat everywhere. For example, there was a market for counterfeit goods in a working class area of Manchester for 25 years that everyone knew about, the police and the government, and no one did anything about until it became a middle class area, and then the state decided to act against the crime. And also, corruption is a corrosive element everywhere. We're currently dealing with the most horrific crimes coming out, and one of the problems in the response to them has been that not only did a lot of officials somewhere within the state turn a blind eye to the activities, but some officials within the state were participants in the crimes as well. And that's one of the reasons that nothing was done for decades. I started off doing my work expecting to do ordinary archaeology, but I was working in southeastern Europe and saw some of the destruction in former Yugoslavia and tried to do work on peace education at historic sites. But people told me it was a nice idea but bad timing unless I wanted to go in a box. So I tried to do it in Cyprus instead, and people didn't say anything to me at all. But then working in Cyprus and Turkey, people started lying to me instead of telling me nothing. And I started fact-checking the lies and finding connections between the people who were destroying historic sites and the people who were stealing historic artifacts. And that's the niche that I've ended up working in, looking at all sorts of aspects, whether it's the ordinary looting in that sense, or the organised crime, or the conflict financing. And I really do wish, for my own sake, that the criminals would publish less self-incriminating evidence, because I cannot process the amount of stuff that I find. They actually often take pride in the fact that they're criminals, and they will self-identify as criminals, like black diggers. I particularly like the one in the bottom corner where someone's siphoning petrol out of a police car in Russia. They are really extremely helpful in self-identifying them, to the point that I basically do my work by searching for the local terms for cultural property criminals and finding their self-organised communities and going through them. And they often give away a lot of information about the economics and the politics of their activities as well. Like the one who helpfully posted a neo-Nazi flag with his semi-automatic rifle in the community as well. But the one benefit of that is precisely that you can get a lot of information about this stuff that has been offered publicly by the participants themselves. And partly that's because of the difficulties of enforcement and the limits of the capacity in terms of the numbers of police officers and all sorts. So they will talk online, like this case of someone finding a sword, and one of the friends of one of the finders posted a picture of it online. And when someone else confronted him, said, "You didn't find that," he said, "Well, the person who did, and named them, sent me the photo and let me publish it. And then the person who'd originally complained, under his own full name, said, 'Oh, I dug it with him.' So then you can identify the full chain and the full identities of everyone. They're so stupid or arrogant that this guy on the right has to stand outside the Eurostar in November, pleading with British tourists not to take bombs on the train that they've dug up in Belgium and elsewhere. And that's why almost everything you see here is going to be in the form of cartoons, but they are cartoons of the photographs that have been published by the criminals. In this particular case, there were so many photos and videos and texts giving away information that were being published by Russia's soldiers in Ukraine that one of their commanding officers nailed the phones and tablets to a tree. But we know that happened because someone who kept their phone back took a photograph of the other phones and tablets that had been nailed to the tree and then posted that online as well. And I think one of the first things, very obviously, is that if criminals can do it and make money from it, they will. You know, often you get people saying that it won't be organised crime or there won't be connections between this and something else because it's a very peculiar kind of criminal activity, and it is quite a peculiar criminal activity, but it is often connected with others. I mean, I think women who hunt for artefacts are interesting in their own right, but this particular case, the one I'm interested in is the second one, who hunts for artefacts and raises endangered species. And she probably makes more money from the social media videos that she posts of her activities than she does from the activities themselves. But you often see these activities combined in whichever way works. And one of the things that I've been looking at recently is the way that low-level artifact hunting and low-level narcotics production intersect. There's a big problem in the United States with the connection between indigenous antiquities and methamphetamine addiction, because, first of all, there are a lot of indigenous sites in the areas of the United States where there are a lot of meth addicts, but also, when you're on meth, you have a lot of focus and a lot of energy, and you have to do something to burn it up. And that one of the things you can do is go and collect all of the arrowheads you find on the surface. And that's a particularly good crime for them because they can exchange the arrowheads for meth directly with dealers who are glad to take the indigenous antiquities because they're very difficult for the police to seize. So even if they lose their other assets, they can then sell the antiquities and get straight back into business. I don't know where the picture on the right's gone, but that can also be a connection with organised crime. So, for example, the one on the left is a guy who was an artefact hunter who became a member of an outlaw motorcycle gang and then became a handler of methamphetamine. And the one who was originally on the right was a biker with a Russian gang who was involved in political religious heritage activity. And this one is another member of that Russian biker gang, the Night Wolves, who tried somewhat to obscure his activity, or at least the connection between his different activities. But his photographs revealed it. And this one is a football hooligan. Again, you can see quite heavily armed, who is an artifact hunter, who is now serving in Russia's armed forces in Ukraine. I'm afraid I have lots of slides, but that's because I have no memory, so they just remind me what I need to say. So this is actually from the Baltic region, but this is something that I've seen across Europe and beyond. There are connections between the foraging of hallucinogenic mushrooms and other hallucinogens like peyote and ayahuasca, and the hunting of artifacts. Sometimes alternating, focusing on mushrooms in their season and antiquities outside, sometimes doing them both at the same time. And they're clearly conscious of which activities are easier or more difficult to police, because they do sometimes delete the photographs of some of the evidence they post, but often not. And in this case, in the United States, they've posted photos of hundreds of arrowheads, as well as more recent historic artifacts. Sadly, the AI was reluctant to include quite how much cannabis was on show in this photo. But they also enjoyed digging while high and cultivating cannabis at home, then going out to hunt for artifacts. And there are also, say in Eastern Europe, sometimes an overlap between the activities, but also competition and clashes between the people who hunt for artifacts and the people who cultivate cannabis, because cannabis grows exceptionally well on top of archaeological sites. So the looters will actually look for 2 meter or 3 meter high crops, and then sometimes steal them, sometimes just smoke them, but sometimes actually burn them. Sometimes because they're very conservative and they actively dislike drugs. Sometimes just because it's the quickest way to get underneath. And they also, sometimes take a strimmer and cut the crops down. It gets to the point that the cannabis farmers themselves talk about the plague of artifact hunters and the increasing number of them who are damaging their sites. They also have a problem with trying to stash the cannabis, because they normally or historically used containers with metal lids, but then the artifact hunters were finding them and stealing them. But now they've started guarding the sites quite heavily, and the artifact hunters talk about all of the problems with, do they arrange things with the cannabis farmers and say, let us know when you've taken your harvest and then we'll loot the site? Or should they report them to the police so that the farm gets struck by the police and then once it's been destroyed they can loot it? Or should they not report it to the police because the police normally take bribes from the cannabis farmers, which is why the farmers have the farm in the first place? And that brings us on to the fact that in the same way as criminal individuals, if criminal organizations can do this and make money from it, they will. The Sinaloa cartel in Mexico and the Turkish fascist Grey Wolves have a really close connection handling drugs, to the point that they post videos of Mexicans listening to Turkish nationalist anthems and Turks listening to Mexican folk ballads of narco traffickers. But they both also handle cultural property, or members of those organizations also handle cultural property, to the point that there are some collections that include Latin American pieces in Turkey, and some collections in Latin America that have pieces from Turkey. And even historically, with the supply of heroin from the Middle East to Western Europe and North America, going through Italy, some of the Turks who were shipping out heroin were also shipping out antiquities. They often enjoy impunity to the extent that these images on the left half were from a public Facebook group for one of the notorious families, where they celebrated some of the better artifacts that they have smuggled in their time, and also posted a photograph showing previous generations who were politicians alongside like the ex-prime minister and ex-president of Turkey, which obviously goes some way towards explaining how they could act with such impunity. And some of them did jobs for the state, and in return for that were allowed to do other jobs for themselves. It was something that was possible to see in the Cyprus conflict as well. Like Tirmashili Mehmet Ali Ilkman, who was the Turkish Cypriot contact for one of the Turkish traffickers who looted churches in the occupied territories, and in the enclaves before the partition of the territory. But he'd been a paramilitary fighter during the Civil War, became an intelligence agent afterwards, but was also very well connected to the person who led the Turkish paramilitaries during the Civil War and became the president of the Turkish Cypriot administration afterwards. It can even be seen, say, in the collapse of the Soviet Union and the rise of the Russian Federation, where one of the activities that brought foreign currency into Russia was trafficking of cultural goods out. And that was one of the reasons that it was accepted or even facilitated. And you can see it quite early in the careers of people who became very serious criminals, like the boss of bosses, Semyon Mogilevich in the top left, and Ilya Trabert at the bottom, whose nickname among criminals was Antiquar, because he had an antique shop as his day job, who was also friendly with Vladimir Putin from very early on in his career. And Leonid Minin up at the top, who was eventually caught in Italy, where he was resident, or Victor Bout, the Lord of War, as he was known in the bottom right. So you can see how this kind of activity is sometimes a training ground for people who become more organised criminals. Also, Pablo Escobar, it's reported that one of his first activities was tomb robbing. One of the paramilitary leaders who was against him, Fidel Castaño, sometimes acted as an art dealer, and even hyperbolically suggested that he made more money from art than he did from drugs. But they openly talked about the fact that a good way of laundering money was through art and antiquities. And unfortunately, it's also known that even some of the stuff that was seized from them was then embezzled by some of the law enforcement agents. And again, this does happen everywhere. One of the larger organised crime families in the UK, the Adams family, is reported to have handled hundreds of millions of pounds in profits from various enterprises, and to have possessed about £500,000 in art and antiques. And the corruption and impunity that I've shown little of, they feed each other, and they also, in places that struggle with the rule of law, rather than merely struggling with the willingness to enforce the rule of law, it really does breed a legal nihilism, which you can see from their conversations makes even people who aren't involved question why they aren't involved. You know, the criminals will talk about people being stupid for not committing crime because the only people they're punishing are themselves by sacrificing the profit of being involved. Vasil Božkov in Bulgaria has been notorious for decades and was notorious for being untouchable. He has been touched recently, he's being investigated now. But it does seem that that was partly because of the level of outside pressure and the diplomatic benefits of acting against him, as well as significant national pressure because people within Bulgaria wanted to end what they characterised as the criminal transition from dictatorship to democracy and to have a sincere transition. In Turkey, they certainly struggle with it, but there is a really massive and increasingly successful effort to struggle against it. They have a fantastic anti-trafficking department now, which has got dozens of experts covering a wide range of things. But at one point, one police officer, Mithat Erdal, tried to investigate other police officers who he suspected of being involved in trafficking. And he was assassinated, and it was judged to be a suicide, even though he was shot in the back of his head. But years later, after the coup attempt, it emerged that the suspects were associated with the coupists, and then it became politically acceptable for them to be investigated. And it's something that I found more significantly in Russia. I found dozens of serving or retired agents talking about it. They even talk about it in online forums for law enforcement agents, recommending it to each other as a supplement to their wage or their pension. In one case, some serving police officers bought a metal detector as a retirement gift for one of their colleagues. And at least one or two law enforcement agents from Russia have retired and settled in the occupied territories of Ukraine, where they are continuing to hunt for artifacts. So that is an additional problem for them. There's a whole network who operate across the border between the occupied territories of Ukraine and the legal territories of the Russian Federation. And in 2014, when they were talking about the unsettled situation and whether they would be able to continue the arrangement, one of the people in it reassured the others it's okay because some of our members are the border guards. And again, that's something that happens everywhere. One police officer in the United States observed, lots of us, serving and retired, seem to be doing it. It is a political problem as well as a policing problem. You can see that sometimes in the way that objects are advertised. So this silver ingot from Ukraine was marketed in America as having come from Kiev, Russia. So it obviously went through Russia and was re-identified by the handlers. Some reports of the pillaging in the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan draw on sources that talk about what's happened on both sides, but only share the half of the evidence about the other side. It's the same when you look at pillaging in Chechnya and reports of whether it's done by Russians or Chechens. And the paintings from the Vestfries Museum in the Netherlands, which resurfaced in Ukraine. There was a whole confusing mess around it, including the offer of money to people when it was believed that they were going to use the money to buy arms in order to return the paintings, but also a campaign against the association treaty between the EU and the Ukraine, on the basis of the fact that this case had not been resolved. And it can also be a matter of political crime, or you can see the nature of policing from the response to political crime. So some anti-war artifact hunters in Russia have now been prosecuted for defaming the president or the army or the country for statements they have made in online communities of artifact hunters, but they have not been prosecuted for hunting artifacts. And especially notably, one of the pro-war artifact hunters who denounced the anti-war ones had posted photographs of historic artifacts that he had found without a license, but he was not prosecuted for that either. So you can see that, and they talk about this again, they talk about the fact that, the police and the intelligence agencies know the people who hunt for artifacts. They have lists of them, but they do not prosecute them. However, those looters know that they are on lists, so they know if they do something wrong politically, then they will be prosecuted. So they know that they can get away with crime as long as they don't challenge the state. And that does happen to anti-war archaeologists as well. So, I've had people suggest that I'm anti-Russian. I'm anti-Russian or anti-crime, and I'm concerned about the crimes in Russia because of their effects on society in Russia and outside. And there are sometimes significant connections between organised cultural property crime and political violence. It can be at low levels, where you have artifact hunters who happen to be members of violent political organisations like the Grey Wolves or like the Kurdish autonomist PKK or Islamist movements and jihadist organisations. You can see it where there will be officials within political parties like the Nationalist Action Party in Turkey, which has an associated paramilitary organisation, and also in the governing party, the Justice and Development Party. But even when it's not a matter of institutionalised financing, it can be a source of self-financing for self-motivated activists like this Turkish ultra-nationalist who posted photographs of the sites that he'd targeted, but also posted photographs of himself with weapons and making the Grey Wolf sign of the fascist organisation. The theft of cultural property in Georgia was reportedly one of the significant elements of the conflict, one of the emblematic elements of the conflict, but it was very little investigated and reported. We do know that it was happening, though, because there are cases like this triptych, which was looted when a building was targeted by either the Georgian police or the South Ossetian militias, and it emerged in Switzerland 10 years later. Again, everyone does it. So, for example, American soldiers did it when they were in Afghanistan. One was kind enough to post a photograph of some of the things that he found, and also of the hole that he dug them out of in the air base that he named. And they talked about the fact they were importing metal detectors through the military mail service, so they could use them in their free time or dig underground when the military was taking up land in order to build airstrips, those kinds of things. So you can see how the crime and the violence were intertwined. And this man was smuggling arms from Turkey into Syria to jihadists and smuggling antiquities out of Syria in the territories under the control of the jihadists into Turkey. And I'll now focus on Ukraine and Russia in Ukraine to show how cultural property crime really can be an important element, even if it's financially a relatively small element and criminally a relatively minor element of conflicts compared to the other activities that go on. So ever since the Revolution of Dignity, during the Revolution of Dignity, cultural property crime was a facet. Not only were museums looted by officers of the Ministry of Internal Affairs or by supporters of Russian paramilitaries, but the government before the revolution, when they left, it was shown how they had significant collections of illegal art and antiquities. And obviously when the president, and especially the Attorney General, have illegal collections, it is unsurprising that there is little action against illegal suppliers. Ever since 2014, there has been a growth in the illegal economy and a growth in the connection between the illegal economy and the conflict. So artifact hunters in the occupied territories of Ukraine have started or expanded tourist businesses that cater to artifact hunters from Russia, who talk about it as a pilgrimage to the new territories of the nation. They've gone in, sometimes in groups, sometimes for days or weeks, to loot antiquities from the new territories and take them back. Some of the artifact hunters have been directly involved, either as fighters or collaborators, and they've sometimes been given medals in recognition of the significance of their role in the initial invasion and the occupation and the intensified invasion. It is true that, naturally, some criminals have been involved on the Ukrainian side as well, in the same way that citizens from all walks of life in Ukraine have been involved in the defense of their country. But the response of society and the state between those two countries is massively different. There have been conversations among the Ukrainian looters about how they should stop committing crime until they've freed their country. When some artifact hunters have been shown to be criminals of that or another sort, they've been expelled from the armed forces and from the paramilitary organisations, because Ukraine, in society and in the state, does not want to support or tolerate this kind of activity. You can see tragic graffiti on sites that have been damaged during the war and liberated, where citizens have written "death to looters," that kind of thing. Whereas on Russia's side, You've had looters from the occupied territories who supported Russia, who've become fighters. It's so significant a factor that even among the criminals themselves, they've observed that the looters, even the looters who are Ukrainian citizens, tend to be Russian nationalist Ukrainian citizens. They fought across the conflict zone in Russia's special forces. Sometimes we have the biography of their activities from before the war, and some of them have been connected with Russia's security services since before the war and played significant roles in the initial invasion. Again, getting medals sometimes. But here, this one, I do not believe that he's a close friend of President Putin or Defense Minister Shoigu, but he was in contact with both of them from 2014. So you can see how close the connections are sometimes and how senior the connections are sometimes. Also in contact with the commander of the Black Sea Fleet. And they also go into the political end. So you get these networks that span crime, politics, violence. They were so significant that Bellingcat noted them when they looked into the investigation into the downing of Flight MH17, because some of the people who were involved were notably known in forums for traders and collectors of cultural goods. And there were connections between conflict zones. So, say, coins of the Islamic State, which obviously are not legally protected cultural goods, but are being collected as cultural objects. They're now going through the Russian mercenaries who served in Palmyra and elsewhere, back into Ukraine, Russia, other markets, through people who've been involved in the fighting. And this is one of the cases where I can show you real photos, because this man, who was a counter-revolutionary in Ukraine during the revolution and became a collaborator during the invasion, then served for Russia in the intensification of the invasion and died in battle. And I was able to corroborate all of the stuff that I found from the forums because his obituary had been published online. But there are case after case after case. Again, sometimes kindly publishing official documents showing exactly who they are and what they're doing, and how now, like so many other criminals, some of them are being released from prison in Russia in return for fighting. And some of them are looting while they're on the front line. They will even sometimes post photographs of their sentencing documents from when they were convicted, in this case, for persistent handling of illegal weaponry as an artifact hunter and now as a fighter. And his only punishment was being made to fight. You get people going in, like outside nationalists who support Russian imperialism. And you get people in law enforcement agencies or security organizations like the Cossack organizations. That also shows how cultural property crime can be a violent crime in itself, because there are people there are non-Cossacks who are deliberately looting Cossack artifacts, or non-Ukrainians who are deliberately looting Ukrainian artifacts. And it is partly a way of ethnically cleansing the territory by looting them and exporting them to markets abroad. There were also, I found it initially a strange number of firefighters who were artifact hunters in the occupied territories of Ukraine. But while I was looking into it, I found that firefighters as an organization are used as a way of obscuring the people who are doing the filtration, the political monitoring of civilian populations for Russia in Ukraine. So it just happens to be an overlap between violent nationalism and artifact hunting where they end up in these organizations. Also like the Ministry of Emergency Situations, who've been involved in the expropriation of museum collections in Ukraine for museum collections in the occupied territories and Russia, as well as pillaging for their own benefit. So I'll just close with that, and the fact that you can see it really in all sorts of sectors. Like mine clearers are recruiting from artifact hunters because of their expertise with metal detectors. And the artifact hunters are recommending mine clearing to other artifact hunters for the opportunity to loot. Even sadly, on the Ukrainian side, where some of the international mine clearing organizations are turning a blind eye to the activities that some of the mine clearers are engaged in, and saying that they have to hand in explosives they find, but not artifacts. And this is someone who has been engaged in propaganda and violence for Russia, who was posting a photograph of mine clearing equipment, and the metal detectors you can see on the left have been donated by artifact hunters. So again, you can see how all of these activities now run together. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. You still had 1 minute.
Oh, God.
But I'm sure people will want to ask questions, and I have a couple, but I want to give the opportunity for the audience. And I see Krista.
Thanks very much. That was fascinating and awful. Just wondering, what do you do with this information?
It's a good question. Sadly, not much. Because the restrictions on handling of data, let alone sharing of data, are so restrictive generally that I have sometimes not been allowed to store data. I've been prevented from sharing raw data with even partners of the projects that I've been on. Certainly, I've been prohibited from sharing it with law enforcement agencies, either out of direct concern for compliance with the GDPR, which I find slightly ridiculous, since this data has manifestly been made public by the subjects, but also out of a concern that academics should not engage in activities that cause harm, and some people define punishment for crimes to be harm. So generally, I don't do anything with it. But I where I can, I will at least say help in training, and then I can show people how to find it for themselves. And if anyone would like me to show you how to find all of these things, especially if you're a prosecutor, I will.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Janika also. And that's the last one there, over there.
Thank you. Do you know approximately for how long do they keep these looted artifacts in their own storages before they put them back in market and sell them, and who are the buyers?
I mean, it's certainly true that sometimes things are kept for years or decades. Often these are family businesses, and like wine, someone will lay down artifacts for the next generation to sell, and they'll sell the things that their parents got. But often they reach the market very quickly. There were things that were found on Katawiki that were being advertised as having been in Western Europe in a family collection for decades. But when some ethical collectors searched the photos from the adverts, they found that they were the same photos that had been used by the looters in the original adverts on online forums, and they'd sometimes reached the market within months of coming out of the ground, even when it was coming from Eastern Europe. So it does vary. I would say often these things reach the market sooner rather than later, especially because they often get sold to the lower levels, to people, not auction houses, but straight to low-level collectors with small collections of little value compared to the high-end stuff. So it's practically immediate, especially when you can just buy it from a forum or Facebook or wherever.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuel Hardy, and I'm sure your next breaks will not be any more boring. People will want to know more. I will ask Marcis Kalnins from the National Heritage Board of Latvia, an expert and archaeologist, to talk about how is Latvia combating illicit trade with legislation.
So thank you. I will stick to my computer, otherwise I'm a very terrible person with a schedule. Hello everyone. It's a true pleasure and a great honor to be here in Tartu for this ICOM conference. Before I begin, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers for providing this forum to discuss the protection of our shared history. Sharing Latvia's experience in combating the illicit trade of antiquities is particularly meaningful here in Estonia, as our Baltic region shares not only a deep cultural heritage, but also similar challenges when it comes to its protection. So as it was presented, my name is Marcis Kalniņš and I'm representing today the Heritage Board of Latvia, where I serve as expert and archaeologist, and in my daily work I'm responsible for managing the circulation of archaeological antiquities, and more importantly for safeguarding our national heritage from being lost to criminal greed. Today I'm not just going to talk about laws and regulations. I want to tell you a story of a decent long struggle from a period of crisis and mass looting to the development of the modern religious system of protection. I will walk you through our legislative journey, our successes in courtrooms, and ongoing challenges we face in increasingly open and digital world. My goal is to show how active cooperation between institutions, law enforcement, and the public can truly change the fate of national history. Europe, but at the beginning I would like to set the scene. More or less you have a lot of heard about this today, but Europe is the global leader in the export of antiquities, with countries such as UK, France, Swiss, Germany and other Western European countries accounting for the largest share of the world's antiquities trade. To put this in perspective, the recent OAC, or Observatory of Economic Complexity data that you can see here, shows that the legal export of cultural goods from EU reaches more than 1.3 billion euro annually. However, this massive, highly profitable legal market provides a very convenient shadow for the illicit trafficking of cultural objects. This is sharply illustrated by Interpol and Europol's joint Operation Pandora. Since its launch in 2016, the successive phase of this operation has led to seizure more than 200,000 items across all Europe, including in a couple of years in Latvia as well. This includes archaeological artifacts, artworks, coins, even musical instruments. Just to give you an idea of the ongoing scale, in one of the most recent phases, in Pandora 9, law enforcement across Europe recovered more than 37,000 illicit cultural goods in a single year. This provides that the black market is not a relic of the past, but active, booming industry. Internationally, there is clear evidence that numerous criminal organizations use antiquities as a source of funding. This includes the destruction of cultural heritage sites and the facilitation of their illicit circulation. EU border countries such as Latvia and Estonia, and of course Lithuania, are in especially vulnerable position, serving simultaneously as a region of acquisition and transit route of these illegal goods, as we heard already today. So, the current cultural heritage protection system in Latvia has evolved over the last 35 years, drawing on more than a century of local and European experience. However, the regulation of circulation of cultural goods and the broader understanding of importance in preserving heritage have developed most significantly only, I would say, within the last decade or a little bit more. Research and data collected by the National Heritage Board of Latvia over the past few years highlight that Latvia is actively used as a transit country as well as country of origin for illegally trafficked cultural goods. Europol's Serious and Organized Crime Threat Assessment also identified Latvia as an area of active criminal operation regarding cultural objects, both through the looting of archaeological monuments and the direct theft of cultural property. In response, the National Heritage Board and the law enforcement agencies has actively joined force in recent years to receive this trend. First, I would like to share the painful history that led Latvia to fully recognize the importance of protecting cultural property and the devastating role that illicit trade played in the destruction of cultural heritage sites. After Latvia joined the EU in 2004, movement across the Europe became free and largely unregulated thanks to the Schengen zone that we heard as well today. While we greatly benefit from the free movement, it's also brought significant risks. With the rise of accessibility and use of metal detectors at the beginning of the 21st century, coped with limited border control, the looting of archaeological sites became a massive problem about 15 years ago. The entertainment industry also played a role, glorifying the Viking era and portraying the looters of historical sites as harmless hobby and the way how to make easy money, as we heard today. The peak of looting in Latvia occurred around between 2012 and 2016, so 10 years ago. We estimate that during this period, more than 1,200 archaeological burials were destroyed and looted in the eastern part of Latvia. Unfortunately, in most cases, the police were not able to identify and catch the looters. A specific vulnerability of this region it's the population since the early 2000s, making it much easier for looters to operate unnoticed. Naturally, as looting skyrocketed, the illegal market of archaeological artifacts expanded significantly as well. This crisis is called intimate action. Consequently, since 2012, Latvia has been actively amending its legislation to hold the looting and bring the art and antique market under the state control. First and furthermore, we had to legally clarify what consists of antiquity, what can constitute an antiquity, and to whom it belongs in Latvia. So, according to the law of protection of cultural monuments, all antiquities dating back to the 17th century, inclusive, so meaning older than 1701, found in the ground, above the ground, in the water, at archaeological sites with state-protected or nearly discovered cultural monument status, or within their protective zones belong to the state. They are under the state protection and must be kept by the public museums. There are two exceptions. First, antiquities reported by individuals to the National Heritage Board before 2013. And second, antiquities for which a person has legally proven their origin and received a written certification from the board. However, the 2013 amendment of the law on the protection of cultural monuments were not effective enough on its own. Therefore, at the end of 2018, Latvia ratified 1995 UNESCO Unitrade Convention, followed by the 1970 UNESCO Convention at the beginning of 2019. These milestones formalized and strengthened the legal instruments and administrative practices already in place within our public administration. Crucially, due to the ratification of these conventions and the fact that Latvia narrowly avoided the money wall grey list in 2018-19, the art and antique market was brought under the anti-money laundering law. Major legislative changes finally came into the force. The legal trade of antiquities became a criminally punishable offense. Despite this gap remained that hampered the effective working of law enforcement agencies. To close them, Latvia ratified and became the member of Nicosia Convention in 2022. This convention helped significantly strengthen Latvian criminal liability in our national legislation. Sections were added to the criminal law explicitly stating that illegal activities such as illegal storage, movement, forwarding and alienation of cultural objects protected by the Republic of Latvia or another states are now strictly criminal offenses. 6 years ago, under the AML law, the National Heritage Board became the official supervisory authority for the art and antique market in Latvia. Today, the Department of Circulation of Cultural Goods, which I represent today, holds the direct responsibility to monitor and regulate this market and to combat illicit circulation of cultural goods. The impact of these changes is clearly reflected in the statistics of the National Heritage Board's Commission of Evaluation of Archaeological Objects. So that's our main expert body that evaluates all seized and voluntarily handed over antiquities. From its establishment in 2015 until 2021, antiquities were almost exclusively submitted only by the law enforcement agencies, resulting in several seizures of a cope of 1,000 artifacts each year. However, since criminal liability was strictly implemented, private individuals began actively reporting the finds and handing over objects for evaluation and transfer to the museums. The statistics regarding the volume of items evaluated by Commission, especially those handed by the law enforcement, demonstrated the profound impact of our legislative changes even better. Here you can see the first part. Here, it's not showing. So basically, the couple of first years since 2022, annually we were evaluating more than 2,500 objects seized by the police. But in the last couple of years, it has decreased significantly. Since 2022, the number of items voluntarily handed over by individuals has been steadily increasing. Last year, in 2025, this number matched the volume of previously seized artifacts. To this, we must add additional almost 850 items from a major hoard handed over to National Heritage Board in 2025. The evaluation of which was completed at the beginning of this year. In total, we are talking last year about 2,200 archaeological artifacts secured in a very short time. So this is about criminal liability. Despite the progress, we are still dealing with the aftermath of this heavy looting that occurred a decade ago. Here's an example of recent handed over antiquities that, according to our information, were originally excavated between 2015 and 2017. These objects were found in a garage in 2023 after the looter, the garage owner, passed away. His friend took over the property and discovered, well, while cleaning, there were containers, and you can see those metal containers and bags full with antiquities. These are leftovers. The looter couldn't sell these to the middleman organizing this illicit trade. While the local street price of one object might have been just a few tens of euros, we collected information that he was averaging selling like for 10-20 euros one thing. At the auction houses in UK, for instance, the sale price reached hundreds, sometimes even 1,000 euros. So the value grew rapidly while traveling. The antiquities were traveling from Baltic to the Western Europe. And we got information from this friend that he could confirm that the person during the weekends he went to the eastern part of Latvia and was digging out these antiquities. We approximately know the possible monuments which he looted, but of course that's not surely in any way, it's not provable anymore. In the autumn of 2024, a precedent-setting criminal case against the middleman named Edgars Fombergs finally concluded. Back in 2013, during the baseline declaration period of antiquities in Latvia that I was telling before, he declared possession of over 100 archaeological objects. However, during the investigations into illicit trade in 2018, the state police seized 106 archaeological artifacts from him. Crucially, none of them matched the items that he has previously declared. Following evaluation of National Heritage Board and National History Museum Commission, legal proceedings were initiated against him in 2020. Unfortunately, in 2022, the state lost the first instance court case due to, incompetence of the prosecutors and the judge. And that is one of the things that we still need to work with them to educate them. We appealed, and in 2023, the second instance court delivered a conviction ruling that Fombergs has illegally stored and sold state-protected antiquities. He submitted a cassation appeal in 2023, but 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago actually, it was rejected. He's sentenced 6 months of suspended imprisonment, a 1 year probation period, and confiscation of antiquities entered into force in 2025, I think, at the beginning. And finally, in 2025, so basically 8 years after the case were started, the antiquities were transferred to the National History Museum of Latvia for permanent storage. As you can see, these criminal cases usually are rather long time. The most popular argument for the defendants were that they were kind of trying to providing the origin of antiquities. So they claimed that the things that they were selling or somehow got, that they are found in a very wide region and not originating in Latvia. And of course, questioning the level of expertise of the experts. So how can you say that it's that old? Because, you know, there is no strong evidence for that. Even so, for this case, the Commission of Expertise basically were made from all main archaeologists in Latvia. In the most other cases, the defendants reach an agreement with the prosecutor before the case even got to the court. However, this is still taking a year or two. However, our work doesn't end here. We are still actively working to locate and return other antiquities looted and trafficked, for example, by previously mentioned Fombergs. We have identified some of these items in private collections abroad, such as you can see it here with Danish designer Jim Lingvid. His defense was that he was simply rescuing the antiquities from the collections by purchasing them. A common but legally invalid justification of this illicit market. Simultaneously, during the inspections of the flea markets, our department identified another ongoing problem directly tied to the previously mentioned Schengen zone. Many antiquities and artwork that legally requires export permits are still being freely moved across the Baltics, as well as Poland, Finland, and we know Norway as well. Just in a month, we had a case where the 19th century Orthodox icon mailed in a parcel from Latvia was seized at the Norwegian border. So the question is how it went there so easily. Based on more than 20 court cases over the last 10 years, we have developed an average profile of individual involved in illicit trade of antiquities in our region. In all cases, and exclusively all cases, they are men aged between 35 and 60. Many share the hobby of metal detectors. Furthermore, in several instances, the illegal acquisition and trade of antiquities is a secondary crime. The primary offenses often involves the illegal storage of weapons and explosives. Last year, the antiquity that you see on the screen were seized by the police during the massive operation targeting the large-scale cigarette smuggling. Over 400 antiquities were recovered, proving that the illicit trade of cultural heritage is often still deeply intertwined with the broader organized crime networks, even in our region. Through our activities over the past years, the Heritage Board has obtained crucial information regarding the antiquities that were illegally excavated and sold abroad. On the screen you can see some photos extracted directly from the looters' phones, which we acquired during the investigation 2023. These are different types of jewelry as well as small-sized weapons. Main characteristic of these items is that they are easily rather small objects that could be and were easily posted by the parcels. These are just few examples of thousands of antiquities we are still searching by the regularly monitoring auction worldwide. In some cases, we receive anonymous tips regarding found antiquities. Some cases they are not anonymous, thanks to society who are now helping us to find things. Under the Latvian law on the protection of monuments, the finder must report the discovery of any antiquity older than 1701 within the 5 days, as these are automatically considered objects of culture and historical value. Unfortunately, we frequently see that these finds posted on social media platforms without any official reports being submitted to us. This is one of the areas that could be improved: communication with society and education. To proactively prevent the illicit trade of Latvian archaeological artifacts, the National Heritage Board, together with the National History Museum and Academy of Culture, published the catalogue of endangered Latvian archaeological artifacts already 10 years ago in 2016. This catalogue is similar to the ICOM red lists. We are hoping to update this catalogue in the coming years, including other cultural goods typical to Latvia and our broader region, like icon artworks, icons, books, historical period, everyday items, and etc. And at the end, I would like to say that safeguarding cultural heritage is not the sole responsibility of few experts. It's our shared mission. The illicit trade of cultural property does not respect borders, and neither should our efforts to stop it. Only through active cooperation and collective action we can ensure that our roots remain where they belong, in history, not on the black market. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yes, you did it until to the end. Good job. but you ended in the place that I wanted you to end. So I will ask you a question related to this. You focus on National Heritage Board, the role of the National Heritage Board and legislation. Could you reflect briefly how museums and heritage institutions fit into this frame, and how do you cooperate?
As you can see, by this photo as well and description, actually, of course, the museums, as here in Estonia, are more or less involved in all of this circulation of cultural goods, in a sense that quite often people are bringing in the valuable things that they found into the museums. And we have the same problem as you have, that they need to be reported. So at the moment, the thing is that museums are taking these antiquities. In some cases, they are just left next to the doors. So then they bring to the Heritage Board. We are evaluating and passing them either back to that museum or the museum where it belongs. As you saw, that National History Museum, we are working quite close together to try to as well work with society, especially trying to explain what to do and what not to do. We are planning some educational programs as well. So actually the museums are playing very big role, but the thing is that they need to be a little bit guided, because as we have been speaking with some of our colleagues from the museums, not all of the museum workers as well know the law, in a sense that they know that there is such kind of law. They know that they shouldn't take the antiquities from the people who are bringing them, but they don't completely know what to do when the things happens. So that is one of the things that we are at least planning as well to do from the Heritage Board side. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope the cooperation is both ways goes.
Yeah.
Quick question? No? Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good.
And now, Rikardas Dediala from the National Heritage Board of Lithuania. He's the head of the Activity Coordination Division, and he will introduce how illicit cultural property arrives into the museums, sometimes in shady ways.
So hello everyone, and tere for my Estonian colleagues. So dear colleagues, I would like to present to you a small part of the issues surrounding Lithuanian cultural heritage related to how archaeological finds that may have been illegally excavated, as well as other movable cultural property end up in the museums. And what kind of traps inattentive museum professionals may fall into. Although I do not work with museums, but through the lens of my work, and I encounter issues that I would like to share with you. Okay, this one, yeah. Of course, my colleagues from Latvia and Estonia who are working in this field knows that in Lithuania the purchase of metal detectors and other such equipment, like pinpointers, magnets, and so on, is not prohibited, but it's strictly limited by the legal acts. But it's prohibited to use metal detector in cultural heritage sites and protection zones. But there is a trick. All movable objects, cultural objects specified in the Article 3 of the law on movable cultural property that found on land, its surface, water, buildings, structures, and their parts having cultural value, and the owner or manager of cannot be determined, or according to the law have lost the right to them, they become the property of the state. and in our constitution, in the Article 47, it is written that archaeology belongs to the state. So the same law states that the person who accidentally find movable objects specified in that Article 3 of the law must submit them to the Department of Cultural Heritage for evaluation within a week, so to the department where I work. And this is the list of the objects on the right side of the slide. So from the legal perspective in Lithuania, museums may only accept archaeological finds if they were acquired lawfully or come from the official archaeological research, as in many countries. In the past, of course, law were unclear, so people often brought findings to museums, and museums accepted them. Although the objects reached museums, important information about where and how they were found was often lost. Even today, some people still try to get rid of finds by donating or selling them to the museums. So in recent years, missing statuettes from the roadside chapels, it's a huge amount of those statuettes and roadside chapels are in our registry of cultural property. And because they are rare, most of them from the 19th and 20th century or interwar period, it's kind of Lithuanian stuff. Many of those statuettes have sometimes been anonymously brought to the museums by the people who had once obtained them illegally or inherited them, and museums then try to handle and accept them and accept those objects. So today it's hard to know how many objects entered museums without provenance documents or were bought from the private individuals. Currently, discovered cultural objects such as archaeological finds cannot be given directly to the museums. They must go through the department, as I mentioned before. So this is the procedure according to our legislation, that the founder, if he found something that it considered cultural heritage, he has to bring to the department within the week. Our territorial division has to evaluate whether the finding corresponds with the law. Of course, the finder must provide written explanation and indicate the location of the finding. It's the same like in Latvia, probably, and in Estonia too. And our territorial division, in the territory in which finding was found, if there any reason that the finding was possible from the possible cultural object, historically or archaeologically valued place, they have to go there and research that place, look around, and so on, so on. So, and later on, the territorial division forwards the finding to the my division, and we have in the department so-called evaluation commission of movable cultural values. So that commission deciding is that object valuable or not. Let's say it's valuable, so after that we are writing the official paper to the Minister of Culture, and the Minister of Culture deciding where that object will go, to what museum. And let's say if that happens, that finding indicate that it's from the object of cultural heritage that has not yet been disclosed. I mean, for example, findings showing us that they may come from the burial, so the process kicks in, and we have to write official paper to our accounting inventory register division. Later on, they're doing all bureaucratic stuff, and if it's okay, research by, after the research, after the small investigation, I will not go down deep into those bureaucratic aspects, but in the end, if we can indicate that it's really, for example, some kind of object, so it might be put on register of cultural property and it will be protected by the state. So this statistics, and between 2018 and 2025, 11 new archaeological sites, usually burial sites and settlements, were identified and entered into Register of Cultural Property. In relation with this find, 7 individuals were penalized between 2020 and 2025 for conducting search with the metal detectors. But the problem is, as today, it does not know how many finds museums have unlawfully accepted over the past 10 years. And the problem is only about 9-10% of reported finds cases, allowing us to disclose the process to continue. Only half of the detectorists can accurately indicate the find spot, coordinates, and all the circumstances of the discovery. And statistics show how many times they brought us, or we asked them kindly to brought us the findings to the department, or with the help of police they brought us. So this is the cases. Yeah. It's finding. It's for example, as you can see, it's Bronze Age findings. Yeah. And okay. Let's speak about museums. I know a lot of people from the museums in this hall, so you may not like this. In 2018, one Lithuanian museum signed an illegal agreement with Metal Detector Users Club to accept for safekeeping archaeological finds discovered by the club members. Of course, the department and our colleagues from the Ministry of Culture took action to stop this activity, but it turned out that many museums have been illegally accepting finds for a long time. So the department launched an active campaign focused on the awareness raising and training for the museum specialists to address this problem. As Marcis mentioned before about, it's most important is knowledge, to know what to do. So the real problem, we have international, all those international legal acts like Hague Convention, UNESCO Convention, Moderaator Convention, and so on, and ICOM Code of Ethics. But in the end of the day, everything goes around that one specialist in the museum. So, yeah, and museums usually falls, in this very tricky place. So it might be provenance laundering occurred. We can see an ethical administration of cultural property, the evaluating of legal acts, and of course, if we look at the UNESCO Convention, we see that there's very quite good quote about that museums, libraries, and archives as cultural institutions should ensure that their collections are built up in accordance to the universally recognized moral principles. Sometimes museum workers forgetting about that. Yeah, this is the department administers the list of missing cultural valuables that entered register of cultural property. I mean those protected by the state, and we publish it publicly in the GIS system. You can easily find that on the internet. Okay, and. Yeah, and this is missing sculptures from cultural heritage objects that anonymously reached the museum in 2023. But this case is reported by the Kretinga Museum, so we know this case. Just simply one guy sent these sculptures in the boxes anonymously, so nobody knows. Yeah, but as you can see, I wrote in that place that, but how many similar cases still remain unknown to us. And the problem is that many cultural objects were stolen from the roadside chapels, as well as disappeared from the chapels in villages that no longer exist. This is the largest group of cultural valuables, apart from the church items that were stolen during the Soviet period, after the 19th, and continue to face the high risk of loss today, both through theft and through natural deterioration caused by neglect. And over the many years, to our knowledge, some of these statuettes have appeared in the museums, while at the same time, pre-trial investigation into thieves were sometimes initiated by the police. However, then the circumstances of the disappearance were examined in detail, it became clear that some of them had entered museums. This happened in various ways. Sometimes they were purchased from the individuals. Sometimes local residents brought them to the museums because they were at risk, and sometimes people who possessed them on the private land transferred them to the museums. Fortunately, only in the rare cases our museums reporting this, even though the object were entered into museum inventories. It often happened that, according to our records, such as statuettes is listed as missing, while in reality it's being kept in the collections of the local regional museum. So today we can only speculate how many of them they acquired from the dishonest individuals with the intention of saving them, with the museum intention of saving them. Yeah, and as I wrote here, the core problem that the typical museum worker, operating in the paradigm of that is based on the belief that an object must be preserved at any cost, while the others are complying processes that are important for disclosure and this documentation becoming secondary. This would be it would not be a problem, however, by trying safe, for example, archaeological objects as well as other movable cultural heritage items, museums hinders the proper registration process and identification of new sites. So I think, guided by this flawed logic, illegal archaeological digging basically is encouraged in pursuit of good intentions, while the proper recording process is obstructed. So the very process that would allow the rapid identification of as yet undisclosed cultural heritage objects. So yeah, and this also applies to the other movable objects like such as statuettes, as I mentioned before, as very large proportion of which have entered museums through the last 15 years. And to this day, we still do not know how many of them are there or by what means they came into museum collections. Yeah, and you will ask how we know that. In Lithuania, there is so-called LIMI system. It's so-called Lithuanian Integrated Museum Informational System. Basically, all museum valuables has to be registered in this LIMI system, and it's public. You can easily find on the internet. And now it has 1 million, more than 1 million documented items. And we are checking the LIMI system and finding those objects that we thought are missing. So it's kind of strange situation we have. Yeah. So I would call this circle of danger. It's like a small diagram, it's a conceptual scheme showing the situation of museum professional may fall into then handling heritage carelessly. So, ignorance, when you're not following the legal acts, you're in the perpetual risk. You're encouraging a crime. You undermine the documentation process. And of course, it's provenance laundering occurs. So, yeah, and what can I say? The museum workers always has to know the same information as we know about the legal acts, but unfortunately, sometimes they want just to save, preserve, no matter what, and we have in this kind of strange situation. Yeah. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. You actually had very good time management. We are behind of time.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
So, museum specialists, one question. Go ahead. Okay, I have a simple question for you. How can you improve the cooperation from your side?
Last year our ICOM Lithuania started the project, the PRISM project, and as my colleague from Lithuania mentioned, we are preparing the book guide for museum workers, how to handle the situations. So I wrote that part about illegal stuff, legal acts, what to do, where to find information, and so on. So I think it's kind of a good guide for our museums to not to fall into those traps I showed before.
Okay, good. There is hope.
Yeah, there is hope.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, for the last speaker of the day, Sophie Delapier is going to talk about the ICOM's role on combating illicit trafficking on cultural goods. The floor is yours, and you're the last.
Thank you very much. We will try to regain some hope, I hope so, about what we can do, in fact, in front of the traffic of cultural goods. But first of all, I would like to apologize because I'm late. And believe me, it was not my wishes to do a stopover in Helsinki, even a beautiful town, I have to say. But so I deeply apologize because we were successfully with my colleague Melina, who is also over here. We were able to listen the morning. So I think Signe and Nela, we are you and the customs too. Very interesting. But then we have to leave. So I'm sorry for the one we didn't understood, and I will try to catch up with some of you later. So in a few minutes, I have been requested to speak about the ICOM's involvement, the ICOM tools, as well as the PRISM project. So let's start. I will try to also keep the time. So first of all, and in any case, even if I have 3 hours or 5 minutes, I always begin with the same a few seconds about ICOM, because I really also believe that sometimes, I'm sorry for the one who know by heart ICOM, but maybe some of you don't. And so to understand correctly what we do, I think it is important to understand who we are. So in a few seconds, I would like to recall that it's a non-governmental organization that have been founded 8 years ago. We are celebrating the 80th anniversary this year with a special logo that you can see. And certainly what is the strength of ICOM is the network, because now we are over 60,000 members in the world and present in many, many countries. We still have to gain the countries that we don't, because what is very interesting in this organization is that from a museum professional from a country A to another country, we can very link the person. And so at the Secretariat, we are a little Secretariat in Paris, but we spend probably most of our time to click the people together. I was in another meeting in Cyprus a few days ago, and it's exactly why I spent my time between the presentation to speak to the people of other sectors, police, customs, governments, and they were interested about the work we do. And I spend my time to say, okay, I know somebody about that, or we have an expert about that. So it's really interesting for us to do this, and I will speak about this click a lot of time in my presentation. Of course, I have to mention, ICOM Estonia, because we are here, but we have also the international committees. I will not speak too much because I expect that maybe Kim Covent, which is in the room, and in ICOM Security might speak about the work done by the international committees that have another job working on special expertise, but I will leave her to go there. So, of course, when we speak about the illicit trafficking, this question even it's obvious why we were working about that. But what is not so obvious is that when we work with different partners in the world, from UNESCO to UNIDROIT to Interpol or others, the role of the museum in this diagram is a little bit strange, because we don't have always the same profile when we speak about fighting the traffic. We can have the profile of victim of a theft, as we saw recently, and we have also another role that we heard a few minutes ago about the acquisition that museums continue to do to nourish the collection, which is the normal way to continue and to pursue a collection. But this question about the ethics in acquisition is fundamental, and I will come to it after. And then another role, this one is maybe, and it's a shame, I think, it's less visible. It's all expertise that museum can offer when we deal at national level, especially on this topic. And it's something that ICOM tried to create because in some country, the link between police, custom, museum, library, archive is very active and produce very interesting results. But it's far from often. And we try to show the best practices, we try to show the good result, and we encourage them. So the positioning of ICOM on this topic can be very, very different from a country to another one. For a country that is very involved already, know a lot about this topic, from country who know nothing. And I will come especially to that when I will speak about PRISM, because PRISM exactly targeted this point. So what we do, very theoretically, so I will try to go quick because the tools are after. As the Association of Museum Professionals, also one of our strengths, because we are together, because we can reflect the culture, the different culture, museum culture through the world, we are able to define standards. That is particularly complicated, particularly long to do, but so efficient when implemented as the Code of Ethics. We do trainings and workshops. That is always with our partners, especially I see Director Krista Picat in the room. So I will mention, of course, the excellent collaboration with UNESCO on that, because when we have the possibility to develop and to participate in the trainings and the workshop of each other, it's always a pleasure to do so, because it's also very efficient. It's happened also that within our network, and that is more confidential, but that we are giving some advice in a case, because they know that they can rely on us for expertise on certain area. So we do that, and then finally we do awareness raising, not only within the museum professional and community, but in the general public also. And I will speak in a few minutes about the observatory. So on the cooperation, I already kind of mentioned it. Maybe the most long-term one, we are with the one in the circle, UNESCO, Unidroit, mainly to implement the two conventions that I suppose already be discussed today, so I will not come there. And also with Interpol and the World Customs Organization. But the last years, this cooperation have been bigger and bigger, and that's for the best. More universities, more ministries, more NGOs, and more projects are involved on this area. And again, that's for the best, because certainly there are a lot of work still to do. So now that I very quickly spoke about ICOM and, let's say, our global perspective on this traffic, let's speak about the tools. So the one that maybe we discussed a little bit less the last year, but come back full speed, it's the object ID. The object ID, again, it's not the point here to do all a class about that, especially because probably some of you know, but still, I always prefer to mention it. Because for the last, let's say, 2 decades, we saw a huge development of database. And we still see the development of database. But the problem is that if we want the so-called cooperation, we need to think about interoperability. And if we have to think about interoperability, we have to use the same way to describe an object. Because if a specialist is describing an object, and another one who is not specialist, but who has to work with the database, then we might not reach our goal. And again, I will not speak too much about that, but I like to give simple example to make it clear that when we do exercise, we put an object and we put 10 museum persons from the same country without giving any indication. We have 20 different descriptions. So imagine in the world with our all different culture. So the fact that Object ID explains really well and very simply how to describe an object, how to photograph an object, how to put, if we have information about the provenance that I agree are not enough present. But we have more and more tools at our disposal to go deeper into description. So that is something very much, it's a tool that has 30 years, by the way. And still today, we believe that it's maybe one of the strongest tools of ICOM regarding the fight against the traffic, because this tool helps to document. And we heard a few minutes ago how much documentation should be top priority for museum people, and I completely agree with it. So it's a tool that we will continue to develop, in particularly through the observatory. So, and to show that it's still a relevant tool is that with the creation of the ID Art app by Interpol a few years ago now, there is a part that is just to create an object ID when an object needs to be recorded. It's very simple. A lot of experts consider it's too simple, but it's better to begin with a common basis, and then if we want to go further into the description, fantastic. So it's a tool also that have been endorsed at EU level, as we can see from the regulation on the import of cultural goods. So the second one that we already heard a little bit about is the ICOM red list, which is this for the one example. This one is the crane. So again, for the one who know it by heart, I'm sorry, so I just repeat that there is a confusion still very much present. It's that it's not a list of stolen objects. We still continue to read that into a newspaper in particular. But no, that's the complementary to the database existing already, generally from the police side, that are database of stolen objects. But what about all the objects coming, for example, from the illegal excavation that we have no clue about and they are already somewhere? And how alert the world about this problem? I take the easy case of Ukraine, when the invasion began and then suddenly the international world of culture were very alerted of the possibility of the traffic coming from this country. The point was, okay, we need to be careful. But especially the law enforcement agencies said, okay, but careful about what? So we need to have clear information. It's exactly what are doing the red list. Each object in the red list are not stolen. They are in museum. For example, here we have an example in Côte d'Ivoire. But what we say, and what's the difficult job of the red list, you say, this statuette Ma, this one is not stolen. This one is in the Musée des Civilisations, Abidjan. But if you are a Belgian policewoman and you see in one of your investigations something looking like that, red flag. Because in ICOM we tell you three things. First, it's vulnerable in his country. Second, it's on demand on the market. And third, it's protected by the country. So if this object is not accompanied by a documentation, okay, super red flag. That's all I can say. The rest is the job of the police and the customs. We just say, if you see something like that, careful. That's all. And we're happy if it's like that, if you can find things like that. So as you can see, as inside of the red list, this is an example of SEE, we do not try to not put too much text, because that's not the point. It's not an encyclopedia, it's not a book. It's just a flyer, a very short one, and we keep it in this format because it can go to the wall of the offices to train the eye too. And so we show a lot of pictures of the object that have been designated by the expert as vulnerable. So I already spoke about it. I spoke a lot about the LEA, but it's not only for them. It's for auction houses. It's for museums. It's for every people who are involved in the circulation of objects and should check their provenance or their origin. So we have, for the moment, a few red lists. Again, the PRISM project might help to go for the next step of them, presented possibly through digitization, but that is for the next step. And that's the last two that have been published last year, Greece and Turkey. And for the moment, we are updating Peru, we are updating Afghanistan, and also there we have a cooperation with UNESCO who help us to identify Afghan experts in the world to help us to create it. And then we are doing Red List Sudan. That is the newest one. So we have a success story, even if it's complicated to receive this information. So if you know some objects that have been recuperated or restituted thanks to Red List, do not hesitate to tell us. It's very complicated to find this information, but we have some that show that we are encouraged to continue. Again, this tool has been recognized at international and national level. Some countries put them into the legislation. Here is the case, again, of the same import regulation that mentioned those red lists. This is a text from the UN Security Council, the very famous Resolution 2347, that also mentioned this tool. I'm a little bit going quickly, but it's to show you that it's very much a tool that is known. Regarding the code of ethics, I hope you will forgive me. I will be very quick on that, even I'm open to every question you may have, because why? This tool is very important for ICOM, very important regarding this topic, but it's in revision, and this, the current version of 2004 is current. It has been discussed long time, and I will see, but maybe adopted the new version in June. So we are for the moment in the limbo of what if this version will be adopted. Probably yes. The point is that the question about provenance, about the full history of a document, the question about the participation in the fight against trafficking, all those questions will continue to be in the text, which for us it's the most important. And of course, we'll go into more topics such as sustainability and other one. So on the observatory, a few words about that, because this tool was created now 10 years ago, as with I can say it because it's an idea from my predecessor, so I can humbly say that it was a very good idea at the time, because the problem also is that there is a lot of resources regarding illicit trafficking. When you are a PhD, when you are an academic, you can find thousands of information, but it's difficult to find them. And the observatory had this aim, a little bit challenging aim, to try to help and to facilitate the obtention of information. Not by, and the good idea was not to take information everywhere and to put on a new database, but rather to help the user to be redirected to the place where they can find an information. Again, I will take an example from UNESCO. The point, for example, if you look for legislation about a country A or B, the observatory will not tell you, oh, here is the list of all the legislation. No. The observatory will say, go to the NatLaws UNESCO database. That's what we do. And that's what we expect with the new PRISM project too. And we will do. And then it's a collaborative platform, because we are also working with a lot of experts, ICOM and non-ICOM, to be sure that we try to be at the most up of the information available. Again, it's a challenge, but we will get there. So I spoke enough about it. I mentioned it now. I need to explain it. So PRISM Action. It is an EU project, and the full name, and I will say only once because it's long, Fight Against Illicit Trafficking of Cultural Goods, Monitoring and Preventing Measures to Secure Museum and Document Collections. So PRISM goes for Prevention, Research, Investigation, Security in Museum. So it's a 3-year project that is funded thanks to EU, and the partner in this project are 7. There is 2 parts to the project, and on the part with the national committee, we have 6 national committees that are mentioned here, and 1 institutional member, the one in Romania. And for them, so each of them are very particular challenge and projects to do, and with the help, of course, with the ICOM Secretariat and the Heritage Protection Department. What is important to understand, in the PRISM project, it's function like the 2 lungs. There are 2 parts, but the 2 parts are speaking to each other. The first part is the improving of the observatory, because the last year this observatory was lacking technological updates, content updates, so it's a moment to not let go with these tools. It was a great tool, it was time to revival it, because its use is useful. We have enough written about its usefulness. So we decide to revive the observatory while also going on the field with thanks to our networks, and to choose 7 national partners that could work with us to develop ad hoc projects. So we really, with the EU colleagues, we took the time. It took the time, but it was good to really go tailor-made, because that's something that we discuss in length, and that's why I take a few seconds or so to speak about it. What is very interesting about PRISM is that EU gave us the opportunity to analyze on the field what was necessary in these 7 committees and national level, because the 7 countries that are on the map before have completely different level of awareness raising, of capacity building, of publication, of knowledge, of political interest. So we took the time to analyze like 7 independent files. And if a country told us, we work well with the customs, we work well with the police, so we will continue the cooperation, but we will not focus on that. Because the problem in my country is that the public has no clue about this topic. So we will work on public information and awareness. When its neighbor country will told us exactly the opposite. So it was very interesting to give to EU the clear understanding of the situation at national level, yet giving some link between those 7 projects, and that was, in fact, the challenge. So from awareness raising to publication to exhibition to practical tools for children, we have a range of deliverables, but those are absolutely tailor-made, and that's something that I really liked with the PRISM project. And the other side, as I said, is, and I will finish by that, is the refurbishment of the observatory, seeking that into the EU strategy in terms of illicit trafficking, this observatory was one tool mentioned in particularly in the big action plan that was published in December 2022. So I already said a few about that. Activity 1 within the observatory to review it completely, the content, the structure, the presentation. We worked a lot with experts, as I said, from ICOM, from outside ICOM, to make sure that we deliver an information at the same times that can be understood by somebody who just arrived on the observatory and just wanted some simple information, and also, but also relevant to an expert. So this wide range of information is certainly the most complicated to do for the observatory. And then we are currently working, and it's my colleague who is also in the room, Melina MacDonald, who are coordinator of this project, and ensure the technical design, the databases, because now we had 1, now we will have 4, to be sure, and that are cross-cutting and that also responding to other databases that ICOM has. So we want to make sure we have a work that is sustainable, because it's 3 years, and as all EU project, after the 3 years, what we want to ensure that we will go further and that ICOM will be able to continue with this tool. And for that, we are ensuring that we have the very scrutiny eye of our experts that, believe me, see all the things that are not going well and that redirect us to more simpler information, or on the contrary, more deeper information. To give you an explanation, for example, the question of due diligence, the question of authentication, the question of fake document, all of this topic, well, we would like them to be there. Probably when we will publish the observatory, it will still need a few months to be perfectly done in terms of content. Even work is never perfect. But what we want to ensure, and we have this platform that is like an educative/expert platform that can answer questions. So that is a picture of the first expert meeting of this second phase that was in December, when we can see colleagues from Ukraine, we can see colleagues from Interpol, Brazil, Sudan, UNESCO, Netherlands, Belgium, Turkey. We don't see them, but we have Japan and Burkina Faso. I'm sure I forgot some. And the timeline, well, it's a 3-year project. We already made the year 1. We are in the most important one is the second, with the biggest implementation. 1 month ago, we were in Romania for the all part of the project. Now we are in Estonia. And the end of June, we will be in Latvia, and we will continue to support the project as much as we can. That is the social media, and I finished. And I will just want to mention that it's soon the International Museum Day. And of course, today it was not the point, but to speak about the geopolitical situation that we are all aware. We were not there to speak about the emergency action that ICOM take in countries that need the most. But in this, let's say, complicated year, I thought that the theme chosen by the network, which is museums uniting a divided world, was kind of the good moment to propose this theme, and I wanted to share it with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was long.
It's very good time management, very good. And then we have time for 1 or 2 questions. I know it's the end
It's
of the
a long day.
But everybody wants to go to wherever they're going. but okay, I will ask you something. You can't. Nobody has left this stage without a question.
Okay.
Yet. Okay, I will ask about the red lists. How effective are the red lists in everyday practice, and where do you see its main limitations?
Again, the effectiveness of the red list is super complicated to measure because we don't have what we dream in this area. We don't have numbers. We all dream about numbers. Even in the observatory, we dream about numbers. It's very complicated. We try to measure, but of course it's completely different because from a LEA, for example, I remember a colleague of North Macedonia that was saying, oh, the red list is SEE, Southeast Europe. It's change really things. I put it every day. I alert my colleagues, and so I was okay, super. But then for academics, they maybe consult once a year. It's difficult to see what we can do, and why we continue to do it is because what we hear and the people with who we work and the colleague from the police, the customs, in the trainings I mentioned, or in conferences that people keep speaking about the red list. And we also see some result in the news. For example, a few time ago, we saw the result of an Iraqi object since in the Netherlands, and they mentioned that our red list was part of the investigation process. And we are still country that come to us to ask to do one. So I suppose that if countries still want a red list, that is useful. And the second question?
limitation.
The limitation. That's we could say a lot about that. For example, some country, what is the most complicated is to keep 40 objects, 40, which is a simple because SEE it's a double, so it's 100 something. But to keep it very, very short. But also, what we heard is that books, we have ton of books. I am a big fan of books. I have many, but it's true that we don't have always the possibility to go through the books. So the fact that the red list was as a post, let's say like as a poster, as something that is easy to approach, and not make somebody who is not a professional, is not afraid by these kind of things, help a lot. Is it enough? No. And I always said that everywhere. I think ICOM never say that it was the tool. It is one tool. And if it's to see that it's accompany the Interpol database, the UNESCO virtual museum, it's a sort of working together that is important. So there are some limitations, but for me, the limitations are already answered by other tools. So that's really a limitation.
Thank you for the very comprehensive answer. Yes.